Hello, everyone, and welcome to this conversation practice together with teacher Fred, a Native American teacher. Today, we're going to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. Today is our national holiday. It's Monday, January the 16th, and it's a very good opportunity to talk about this very, very famous man. So, teacher Fred, who was Martin Luther King?
Well, first of all, good day to you, teacher.
Yeah, good day to
And
you.
yes, and this is a very timely topic, of course, as it is, as you mentioned, Martin Luther King Day in the States right now, in America. And Martin Luther King was a famous civil rights leader,
Ooh,
and he he fought for equal rights for blacks, or at the time, blacks were called also colored people.
ooh.
So this was during around the 1950s and the 1960s, teacher.
Oh,
And especially the problem was very, very much worse in the American South. So when we think of nearly all of the southern states,
such
were
as
very, very, oh,
Alabama,
I'm sorry,
uh,
Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi,
Georgia,
Tennessee,
Mississippi.
Arkansas. We can
Yeah,
go on and on. North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, of course,
also Texas.
um, Louisiana, Kentucky. So all of the southern states really had big problems with racism and discrimination against blacks and colored people.
Mm.
So
Did he,
Martin
I have
Luther,
a question, teacher. Did he die or is he still alive?
yes, yes, Martin Luther King, tragically, he was assassinated in at the age of 39 years old in Memphis, Tennessee.
Wow.
And
How
he,
did he
the,
die?
there was a man named James Earl Ray, and he assassinated Martin Luther King Jr. He had a long distance weapon,
Wow.
and he shot from a long distance. Martin Luther King was on the second level of a small hotel, and when he went outside, James Earl Ray was waiting for him, and he must have been a very good shooter, and he killed
Okay.
Martin Luther King.
Was Martin
And
Luther King married?
yes, he was married. His wife's name is Coretta, and
Is she still alive?
I believe she's still alive.
Did he have any children, teacher?
I believe he had three. I'm not sure if it was three or four children, but yes, he did have children.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And um, he Martin Luther King. He one thing to remember was that he always recommended peaceful protests. So
Peaceful
when he was
protest,
talking to people, he never supported or advocated violence.
violence. He
He,
never supported violence.
right. So there were other black leaders at the same time,
Oh, really?
such as Malcolm X, who
Okay.
was Malcolm X was a famous leader, but he was from the Muslim community, and
Oh,
they had a group and they called themselves the Nation of Islam. And but Malcolm X, he was not afraid to tell his followers that sometimes
use
violence
it,
is necessary.
to use the violence.
Yeah, so the police, they didn't like this. They didn't
Oh,
like this because it could lead obviously to more trouble.
yeah, that's
But
true.
But Martin Luther King was a very peaceful man, and he never advocated violence. And I believe he also was a very religious man. So in many of his talks, he always, at one point, he would always mention God.
Oh, that's nice.
And he
Teacher,
would talk about,
was Martin
yes,
Luther King able to change any kind of law? Was he able to change the law in some states?
yes, he's based on all of his efforts.
Wow.
Many laws on the federal level, the national level, were changed.
Wow. Such as, can you tell us an example, maybe the public transportation or
Oh, sure.
words?
Yes. Well, for example, um, there were laws at that time that said blacks or coloreds, if they're riding on a public bus, they could
Okay.
only sit towards the back of the bus.
In the back,
They could not sit in the front.
in the front.
So
Wow.
the front of the bus was only for whites.
Wow.
And there was a famous woman named Rosa Parks,
Okay.
who one day, I forgot what state, but it was in the South, and she got on a bus and she did not follow. So usually most of the people would just follow the instructions.
So
And if you were black,
she refused to sit in the back.
she refused to sit in the back.
Wow.
And
then
this
what happened?
was oh boy. And then this became a national
Big news.
story. Yes, yes. And because of this, many laws were changed.
Oh.
And this was no longer allowed.
So she became very famous for that.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
But the origin came from Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh.
And all of the things that he was saying.
She was a supporter of Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh, certainly.
Definitely.
Sure. And the other word I want to mention is the word segregation. So segregation.
Segregation. Can you tell us what the meaning is? Yeah.
Sure. Segregation means separating people. Typically on the basis of their race or their skin color.
Okay.
So again, during this time in the 1950s and 1960s, American public schools were segregated. So if you were white, you would go to a public school where only white students would attend.
Wow.
And if you were black or you were colored, you could not go to this school. You had to go to another school where all of the students were black or colored.
Wow. So that's why he was fighting for this right.
For many of these issues.
Yeah.
And this also, of course, over time, this was changed on the national level.
If you take a look, this was only a few years ago, not even 50 years ago. Yeah. Yes. So it was not like 200-300 years ago.
No.
Our
Ronald
parents
Reagan
were alive already.
Ronald Reagan in 1983 signed a law, and he declared this holiday to be named after Martin Luther King Jr.
Wow. And only the few people has this honor.
Only 3 people in America have holidays named after them. We have Christopher Columbus, the famous explorer, George Washington, our first president, and Martin Luther King Jr.
Wow, what an honor.
So that shows how important he really is, teacher.
Wow. Very nice, teacher.
And his birthday was on January 15th. So that's the reason why his holiday is usually celebrated on the Monday that's closest to January 15th every year. So, for example, this year, Monday is January 16th.
16. Yeah.
So it's usually, sometimes it's right on the 15th if it's a Monday, or they'll look for the closest Monday to the 15th.
The 15th.
Yeah, but it's always on a Monday.
On a Monday. So that's
This is
why
a national.
banks are closed today.
Banks, schools,
Schools.
government buildings, most offices, whether public or private, are closed because this is a national or a federal holiday. So this is a very, very important day. And sometimes, again, maybe it's still a little bit controversial. So maybe some Americans, depending on where we live and what our beliefs are, they don't fully support this holiday.
Yeah.
I think you can kind of get my meaning.
Was there any kind of movement against him at that
Oh,
time?
yes. Yes, many from mostly, of course, from whites and white hate groups.
Yeah.
So the most famous example would be the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh, yeah.
The Ku Klux Klan was they were based out of North Carolina, and they did terrible things to blacks and colored people. They're usually covering their faces and putting a white cloth, over there. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen this in movies and television programs and documentaries
everywhere. Wow, teacher, thank you so much for enlightening us about this subject, which is very, very important for everybody, for immigrants, for people who are learning English. Martin Luther King Jr., a very, very important person. He was a real influencer.
Yes, and that is kind of the story behind this holiday.
Yeah, behind this holiday
we're celebrating today.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us about him?
Well, I think he's a hero for many people, not only for blacks, but for people of many different races, different cultures, because he stood for basically all good things.
Did he belong to any kind of religion?
I believe he was a Baptist.
Baptist.
He was a Baptist, so they have a church. I believe his father was also a pastor, and they have a famous church in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you go to Atlanta, sometimes they offer it on tours of the city.
Wow.
And they said you could visit the church where Martin Luther King grew up and where he spoke.
Very nice.
So yeah, he's also connected with Atlanta, Georgia.
Very nice, teacher. Wow, teacher, thank you so much. I think we learned a lot.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, Martin Luther King Jr. And so today is a special holiday for all of us. So thank you so much, teacher, for for this information to all of us.
Anytime, teacher.
So I hope you like this conversation practice. Everybody practice. Don't forget to place the closed caption so you can read what we say, what we talk. Thank you so much, and practice your English.